they've given themselves more than any human being ever could have. It's miraculous the ways that they've been able to do that. Not only are they not dead, they're doing really well. And then you look at people who got, these big families, 10, 11 kids or something like that, and they're doing really well.
Yeah. You either write them off as being either superheroes or just super crazy.
Exactly.
Fulton Sheen talked about, like in courting, when we're dating, he says we wear masks, but he says in marriage we take off those masks.
Right.
And then there's this vulnerability, and then there's this reality of the other person that's seen so much clearer than before.
Right.
And the question is, how do we respond to that? Do we are quick to point out all the flaws that we see behind that mask that we didn't notice before? Or do we love them despite that, and then at the same time love them through that, and love them with Christ together?
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because regardless, no matter who you are, when we get older, we don't get prettier,
Right.
And it's amazing how marriage lasts like all into that,
Yeah.
So it's regardless of the mask we try to put on, like
Right.
you can only hide so much. You're gonna be ugly. You're gonna be harder to swallow, no matter who it is. But at the same time, in the midst of that, you've got a relationship that is growing richer, hopefully.
Yes.
Growing richer,
Yes.
more deeply, intimate, like more intertwined with one another, to where that doesn't become as much of an issue. You're able to see past that so easily because you see the person.
Right.
To where, like in marriage in particular, you can't avoid that journey.
Yeah.
You can't. Everywhere else, you can.
Right.
And I think that's what makes marriage so unique in terms of its path to holiness, and to be honest, one of the best.
Yeah.
Because you can't avoid the maturity. You can't avoid the potentials for like having to overcome the surface way that I tend to operate.
Right.
Because you're faced with it every day,
Yes.
and you're having to mature with somebody else. Now, in that regard, I would say so we obviously learn a lot from the celibate life, but it's amazing. You ask priests who've been doing it a while, and what they learn from the marriage vocation, like there's a deep need of one to the other,
Yes.
right? So that we don't lose sight of reality. That the deeper a priest enters into the marriage journey, the more they can understand God, the more they understand how God works in the world, and the better priest they become, So it's amazing. So they're both sacraments with a capital S.
That's right.
And just like every other sacrament, they depend upon the others.
Yeah.
The 7 sacraments depend upon the other sacraments, each of them. So it's this beautiful, I think, familial process that God has placed in us to recognize, like, even if you're not the sharpest knife in the drawer, right?
Right.
I've got you on this journey to intense holiness.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean you're going to be, a witness to the entire world.
Right.
I think that vocation of being like a spiritual leader for thousands, there are very few called to that.
Right.
Because to some extent, that's kind of a miraculous process.
Yeah.
You can't really transmit faith outside of a deeply connected relationship.
Yeah.
It's all just ideas. So people like, popes or saints who are able to affect thousands, with this real deep, true conversion change, change of heart and change of life, that is a miraculous grace.
Yeah, but it comes out of, like, I think of like Mother Teresa,
Yes,
right?
yes.
Who not just like, she just didn't talk it and then had a good, this great expression to the masses. Like she went into the slums,
Yeah.
into the ditches, into the dirt, and she pulled out people and loved them.
Yeah.
And people saw that and they felt it and they knew that. That's what speaks loud. So
That's
then
absolutely true.
by the grace of God, she had a platform. But that wasn't something that was, absent of what her daily life was like. And I think that's the point, is that, like, when we come to marriage, do we see that in our home, it is meant to be a saint-making factory?
Yeah.
That our home, the home that we live in, is meant to be the domestic church, right? That place where we strive each day to interact with one another a little more kinder, with a little bit more love, to serve one another, to realize that this isn't my space or this is for you.
Yeah.
And the more that I can live for the other, the more that I can serve the other, and the more that I can put my wants aside and live for the other, the more my life finds fulfillment and meaning.
I think the biggest obstacle to that is a feeling like I'm gonna waste away.
Oh,
if I give myself as much as you're needing from me right now, I'm gonna die.
Yeah.
I'm gonna exhaust myself. I'm gonna get so tired. I'm gonna die. And it's amazing how, especially right from the get-go,
Right.
you get married and you realize after about a month or so that my wife is not me at all. It's like moving to another planet. I got to figure out a way to speak the language, you know?
Right.
And then you have kids, and like, the kids have no capacity to do anything but suck your life away. You know, and they can't help it.
Right.
And that's just the way life is. And so at some point, like, we realize, like, I am never going to be in control of how much I have to give unless I just become a total deadbeat dad. You know, like, and so there's this training ground for it. But there's always going to be in us this kind of like pushback because of self-preservation. Like, if I give as much as this situation is demanding of me,
it's going to kill me.
I'm going to die.
Right.
I'm going to be dead in just a few days.
But what does the passage from Matthew chapter 16, verse 25, you know, he says, everyone who loses his life will find it.
That's right.
How does that apply in marriage?
Well, then going back to Mother Teresa's situation, like, I think sometimes for us, we got to look to people who are like, you know, they've given themselves more than any human being ever could have. It's miraculous the ways that they've been able to do that, and yet they're not dead, they're doing really well. Yeah. You know, and then you look at people who've got, you know, these big families, you know, 10, 11 kids or something like that, and they're doing really well. Yeah. They're not dead. Right. And it's been years.
You either write them off as being either superheroes or just super crazy.
Exactly.
And you don't realize that the super grace that's in them, that there's this, and for the people that I know that have really, you know, allowed God's life to really come into their marriage and into their, with the children and all that, there's this trust in God. It's not this blind trust that they're just going to kind of like let go of the wheel and, you know,
that's right.
But it's this trusting in God that, like, you know, God, I know you're calling us to respond and to act and to think. Yeah. But I know that there's going to be times where it doesn't look like it's going to work on paper.
Exactly.
That I'm looking at it, and the world's telling me that I'm an idiot, I'm a fool, and that I'm going to get, you know, I'm going to end up bankrupt and all this stuff like that. But then I look at God, and He's telling me, take a step on that water. Yeah. Normally people sink, but I'm going to give you a grace that's going to allow you to walk on top of that water. That's right. Do you trust me? And that's where I think part of our relationship of the need to go to prayer more often, individually and as a couple, realizing God's presence and God's grace working in us, and seeing that God has a plan in the small things, like in the washing of the dishes, to the changing of the diapers, to going to school, going to work, to the whatever. Seeing that God is present along the way, and then when we go to make our steps, we take those steps realizing that God is calling us out of the boat, out of our fears, out of our worries, and on a journey that is going to give us so much fulfillment in life, but it's not the ultimate yet.
Right.
And give it all away. Oh, 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 oh.